Welcome into the Sports Veno podcast. College football, possibly the best damn college football show out there with Robbie Veno, Ralph Michaels. We're breaking down San Diego State, USF, and UTSA on today's show. Guys in the chat box, feel free to throw out any questions. Start off with Robbie Veno up in the Northeast at Rob Veno Sports. Robbie, welcome to the show. How you doing, buddy?
Happy Tuesday to you, Drew. Doing well here. Dying to get outside a little bit here in Pennsylvania, still under some strict guidelines. But other than that, just put the nose to the grindstone. And maybe Major League Baseball will give us some good news within the next 24 hours. We'll see.
Yeah, crossing our fingers here, Robbie, for that. Ralph Michaels, last but not least, at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. Ralph, welcome in, buddy. How are you?
Hey, good, guys. Rob, here in Vegas, they opened up restaurants. They haven't opened up bars or casinos yet. And I know I'm opening up myself for a lot of criticism here. But I was able to get a haircut, so at least it feels better.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Is the tooth fixed? Last week it was the tooth. Are we all good?
We're good. I had the best root canal I ever had. So, Drew, whenever you come back into town, if you ever need a dentist, I certainly got the guy for you.
All right, man. Yeah, actually, I'm due for a cleaning. So, Ralph, how is kind of Las Vegas overall, man? Are the restaurants, are any bars open? What's the town like?
No, I think the bars have not been announced yet. Like the PTs out here are opening the 15th just to get ready, but food and no gambling yet. So it's still, there's some restaurants that were busy, but it's still pretty slow. You have the ability to go to a restaurant, have a meal, and have a cocktail with that meal. So, when we get back, we'll certainly meet up at a place that has enough libations for us both. But it's a slow opening, and to be honest with you, some of the reports shocked the hell out of me. There was a report that the Mirage may not open to February 21. Now, the Bellagio would open, the MGM was going to open in New York, but some of the slowness of some of these casinos are surprising with the initial plan. So we'll see how that plans out. So I know that Caesars right now, fourth quarter for this year, their reservations are up over last year because what happened, the Raiders schedule got announced and all the home games for the Raiders, the hotel rooms are normal through the roof like we're going to be accustomed to for the football season.
Yeah, hopefully it works out, and hopefully we can attend the games there, Ralph. I mean, do you plan on going to any UNLV or Raiders games?
Well, right now, the last word for UNLV is there's a snafu with the scheduling, and they may have to play all their games at Sam Boyd. Now, that'll be a whole nother story because I know a lot of people bought season tickets to the UNLV program just to be able to get into the new stadium and see it because the Raiders games weren't going to be affordable. So we'll see how that pans out. I love new stadiums. I love going to live football. I didn't go to nearly as many games as I should have at UNLV because it's Sam Boyd. It's out on the east side, and it just wasn't worth going. But, with UNLV's schedule this year and the Pac-12 teams coming in, certainly want to take in that live football action.
Yeah, and speaking of UNLV, it's actually San Diego State, one of their division opponents, obviously in the Mountain West Division there, is the first team we're talking about on today's show. And we're going over all the changes, get any early looks here. Rob, Ralph, and myself think for the three teams up today, San Diego State, USF, and UTSA. But San Diego State up first, guys. Ralph, I guess we can start off with you, man. The Aztecs, 9-3 straight up last year, 7-5 ATS. I have them as 1-11 on the over-under. So if you were betting unders with San Diego State last year, you were making some real money. Defense, number 5 in the nation. Number 2 rush defense in terms of total yards given up on defense. And one thing that I noticed offensively, not a dominant run game, Ralph. And that's what kind of held them back, in my opinion. But what's your overall view here of San Diego State? We got to change at with coaching for the first time in a long time here with the Aztecs. What's your overall view, man?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be interested. I mean, because we have the coaching guru, Rob. So I'm going to be interested on what his thoughts are of switching out of the 3-3-5, which they're going to do. Now, I completely understand the Brady Hoke hire. It completely makes sense to me. But I'll tell you what, you look back at Brady Hoke. He was 13-12 the first time he was a head coach here. At Michigan, he went from 11 wins to 8 wins to 7 wins to 5 wins. Then what does he do? He's the DC again at Oregon. They're the number 106 defense. He goes to Tennessee. He's the D-line coach for 1 year. Then he goes to Carolina. He's the D-line coach, and he gets fired the first season. So I'm not sure about Brady Hoke. And then you look at San Diego State. They were number 91 recruiting last year. That number seems incredibly low. Who doesn't want to go live in San Diego and play for a winning program in the Mountain West? Well, I'll tell you what, this year, they're number 104 in recruiting. I mean, that's absolutely amazing to me, being that low as far as recruiting goes. Last year, San Diego State only returned 11 and a half starters. So you look at them, they were plus 46 yards per game in conference play. That was 4th in the conference. They, of course, went 5-3 in conference play. This year, San Diego State has 14 returning starters, but you know, while their offense was inept, we talked about it, the over-unders talked about it, their defense kept them in games. Ryan Agnew, the starting quarterback who has departed, does leave with the highest win percentage ever for any San Diego State quarterback. So he was the quarterback that fit perfectly in the system, didn't make mistakes, let the defense do what they had to do. The run game just did enough, and that's why they had so many close games. That's why they had so many unders. And in fact, they went 10-3 on the season, Drew, including an upset of UCLA. The 3 losses by a combined 13 points. But I see a down season. You know, my win percentages only have them just over 7 wins this year. And I'll make the call right now. I'm going to call a long shot out of the Mountain West. And I'm going to call for Nevada to win the conference, and I'm going to have some money on Nevada to win the entire Mountain West.
All right, liking the Wolfpack out of the West Division. I like it, Ralph. And Rob, man, I know you know a lot about kind of coaching here, and Ralph brought up number 104 in recruiting. I think it speaks a lot to not having an on-campus stadium, and that really holding some programs back. But what's your overall feel here of the Aztecs coming up?
Well, it's no wonder that they would be low in recruiting. Who wants to go play in Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes' offense, right, guys? But that's gone. On the offensive side of the football, it's not going to be Rocky Long, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, punt the football, play defense, win games. Drew, and I'm sure, Ralph, you're well aware of this as well, but last year we used to have, and maybe the last couple of years, multiple conversations on how difficult it is to lay double digits with San Diego State, even though they were athletically superior, because offense couldn't score enough to lay 13 with a team like that. So here we go. With the switch on offense, the new offensive coordinator, Jeff Hecklinski, how about these for adjectives that this new offensive coordinator used to describe his system? Electric, vertical, and fast-paced. The extreme opposite of what we've seen out of San Diego State for a decade almost now. Even last year, this team switched to a shotgun offense, and they didn't switch to a shotgun offense because they wanted to throw the ball more. They switched to a shotgun offense to spread teams out so they couldn't so congested to stop the running game. They wanted to spread defenders across the field. How difficult this is for San Diego State to learn will be the question, guys. How quickly can they convert into this and execute it correctly? I think it's going to take some time. This multiple spreads, to describe it a little bit, according to Coach Hecklinski, it contains a lot of RPO concepts. They're going to keep inside-outside zone running. That's not really different from what Rocky Long did, although most of their stuff was off tackle. They want to get, and this is another familiar phrase, as we've gone through these coaching changes and their systems, we tend to hit on a lot of these buzz phrases, buzzwords, but they want to get the ball to players in space, their athletes in space, whether it be on the ground to the outside or whether it be down the field. But the perimeter looks like it'll be used a lot more by San Diego State, more in tune with what we're used to seeing out of college football offenses. Now, going to try and mold it to the playmakers here. Tight end will be significant, according to him. And the play calling will be balanced. I thought this was a funny quote out of the new OC. He said that he's going to call plays that he thinks will score touchdowns. That's probably what everybody thinks when they're calling plays. But that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to be a little bit more explosive. They had an advantage here, guys, 6 spring practices, including a 76-play scrimmage, which gave them a pretty good or a fair amount of time to do some assessment across the board here, offense and defense. On the other side of the football, and real quick, back to Hecklinski real quick, he's going to keep a lot of the playbook verbiage the same, just to help out here with this team. So, I still think it's going to take time. I'm with Ralph, at least on the offensive side of the football, that this is a down-the-road progression style thing. I'm glad to see San Diego State out of the dark ages offensively, but not so sure they get there real quick. Kurt Maddox, Eastern Kentucky DC, steps in. Now, everything I saw through spring practice, they're allowing him to add wrinkles to this defense, but not overhaul the 3-3-5. Remember, Brady Hoke was here last year. He was part of that 3-3-5 defense. He was the defensive line coach. Wants to kind of keep the majority of that in place and allow Maddox, who brings in a lot of blitzing schemes, to kind of work off of it. So this may end up being more of a multiple style defense than the true 3-3-5 that Rocky Long ran. But I think you'll see odd man fronts. That's not going to change really to even man fronts here. The reason why Maddox was the hire is because the two are familiar with each other. We talk about it all the time. I think Ralph used the phrase keeping it in the family. And Maddox has been with him before, so he understands from his time at Michigan, from his time at Ball State, exactly what Hoke wants here. Two are on the same page. Familiarity won't be a problem. I do, though, guys, see a downward step here. And I think that those recruiting numbers, in all likelihood, will go up once recruits see how San Diego State is going to play offense. It'll take a little time, but I don't think they'll be in the hundreds anymore once kids realize San Diego State's going to throw the ball around a little bit.
To Rob's point, I looked up on the database, Rob, and it was a great point you brought up. I looked at San Diego State the last 2 years as a favorite. They went 5-11 against the spread. You mentioned as a double-digit favorite, which, they were archaic. They were 1-8 against the spread. The only game they covered against the spread as a double-digit favorite was New Mexico State, and that, of course, is Rocky Long's main nemesis when he was at New Mexico all this year. He hated New Mexico State, so it's no surprise he ran up to score a little bit against New Mexico State. Drew, to your point, they just broke ground on the new stadium. They bought the old Qualcomm Stadium. They're moving it into where their campus is, and they will have an on-campus stadium that's going to hold 35,000. It's expected to be open for the 2022 season. So there is some excitement for the Aztec fans there that they're going to get a legitimate Aztec stadium. And last point I want to make on the Aztecs is they were very, very healthy last year. Only 35 players made starts. Remember, you start 11 on offense, 11 on defense. The best in the country last year was Clemson, who only started 31 players. So San Diego State very healthy with 35 players making starts. And in fact, for comparison, 3 teams in the Mountain West started 46 players: Wyoming, Nevada, and Fresno. So when you're looking at a team that started 35 and a team that had to have 11 more players from that second and third string make starts, it shows you how much healthier the Aztecs were last season.
Great points, Ralph. And I know we have Paco Healy here in the chat box. He's from San Diego. Paco, maybe you can help us out. In terms of the on-campus stadium there, Ralph, I don't believe Qualcomm is part of San Diego State's campus, is it? Is that where they're doing it? Do you know?
Yeah, I may have mixed up 2 statements there. I know originally they were thinking about buying it. I am not sure of that fact. I may have read multiple articles and they were thinking about doing that, but I saw the press release from them that they broke ground on their new stadium. Okay. And I believe I read that it was an on-campus stadium or very close to campus versus being a transit or an NFL stadium.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah, and it might be something like Georgia State did. They bought the old, and then also turned some of it into residential housing for students. So they kind of call it on campus, even though it's a little kind of quasi campus, I would say. But maybe Paco can help us out with that in the chat. We also got Abel in here. What's up? He's heading to the December 13th game against the Colts in Las Vegas. Dave and Callie as well. What's up, guys? Throw out any questions you got. Obviously talking San Diego State here, USF, the Bulls, and UTSA, the Roadrunners. Robbie, did you have anything else you wanted to throw out there with San Diego State?
No, I think as far as their overall outlook right now, as we sit here in, early May, Drew, maybe close to mid-May, I would be in agreement with the fact that perhaps this is a down year for this team, more of a transition year as they get used to the new system, especially offensively, and whether or not we trust Brady Hoke. I mean, he's a great guy by all accounts, but was not real successful as a head coach at Michigan. Maybe in the Mountain West, where there's less press, where there's less pressure to, there's no natural rival. You don't have to beat Ohio State to hang in there and keep your job. So maybe he'll be a little more relieved here. But we'll see. I just don't see San Diego State responding offensively right out of the chute to the picture of the future that offensive coordinator Hecklinski has.
All right, guys, let's move on to USF, the Bulls, and the American Athletic Conference here. In my opinion, one of the more underrated conferences in college football. 4-8 last year, down year there for USF. 6 over under. I'm posting here. 2-6 in the AAC. They also lost 4 straight down the stretch here, Ralph. The last 4 games of the season were UCF, Memphis, Cincinnati, and Temple, 4 of the better teams in the AAC, but nonetheless losing 4 straight down the stretch. You think USF can kind of be a buy low team here going into 2020?
Well, you look at their last 4 games this year, and it's at Memphis, at Houston, Navy, and UCF. So, not much better. You want to talk, we talked about San Diego State and their recruiting and that number surprising me. I would think this is even more of a shocking number. USF, in the middle of all the talent you have down there in Florida, number 101 in recruiting. In the conference, only Connecticut, Navy, and Tulsa are lower than USF. That is the shocker. Now, I will say this. When my recruiting rankings are the 247.com, sports.com, who by far do the best in the business. And transfers are not part of that ranking. They have 9 transfers coming in. So part of that ranking, 9 enough kids, so it's a little lower than it should be. So while I give you a low number, let me go back and preface it. They're going to have, out of their transfers, I think 3 of them, maybe 4 of them are going to be starters, which is something you're going to get more than that impact transfer. But again, they were number 77 recruiting last year with 14.9 returning starters. This year, they returned 14 starters. Jeff Scott, of course, brings the Clemson mantra in. How well is he going to do? We don't know. You're under that Clemson banner. You have the best players in the league. You have the best coach in the league. You have, NFL talent everywhere. So there's a lot of people that could be good OCs at Clemson. So while I say Jeff Scott's a great hire, I'm not one to just anoint him and say he is going to do a great job here, because now he's on his own. We're going to have to see. Of course, Charlie Weiss, he brings in Charlie Weiss Jr. and Glenn Spencer as the OC and DC. But I see USF, their win total 4.5. I have them as a double-digit dog in 5 games. So let's knock out 5 games. That only gives them 7 games to win 4.5. They're going to be a double-digit favorite in 2 of them. They're going to be a single-digit favorite in 1. Again, the advantage here is you have the easier part of the schedule early, so you can get some wins. But again, going into the season, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to expect. The offense is going to be much more dynamic. And if I look at the last year and say, who was the worst coach for the system that they had? To me, it would be Charlie Strong at USF. When Taggart left, they wanted a big name. They brought in Charlie Strong from Texas, and he completely decimated this program. They were quick. They were athletic. They had dynamic talent on the outside and a quarterback. They had Flowers there. They could have been the top group of 5 team. Charlie Strong changed the system. He was stagnant. He went to his archaic style. That's part of the recruiting the way it is. That's part of the losses the way it is. So I clearly think Jeff Scott's going to have them headed in the right direction. You got a running back transfer from Oregon who's going to be dynamic, and Felix. You have a running back transfer from South Carolina who's going to add a piece to the puzzle. So, while I won't touch the 4.5 because I think it's the right number this year, I certainly have a buy sign for them moving forward.
Man, great breakdown there, Ralph. And yeah, you're right about the Charlie Weiss thing. And for those that don't know, Charlie Weiss, a longtime defensive coordinator for the Florida Gators. I believe they won the national championship there.
Charlie Strong. Yep.
Yeah. Under Urban Meyer. And so I think USF kind of went with that and thinking he would recruit real heavy in Florida. And it just, like you said, it was more stagnant and it just didn't work, even though they did have the talent, in my opinion, especially at the quarterback position. But Robbie, what are you thinking here for USF this upcoming year?
Yeah, it's interesting, Drew. And another thing to add to this is, and you're right there, so you can help more than anybody. If Florida, one of the states that's opening up quicker than a lot of states across the country, but if Florida, to the best of my knowledge, and I'm not there, is opening up kind of sectionally. Tampa sits right in Central Florida. Perhaps USF, Central Florida, if they get back to their facilities quicker than other states do, it could present an edge from that viewpoint as well. Right now, we know that Florida, Texas, SMU in this conference would be included in that, as would probably Houston. But, there's a lot of northern schools there, too, especially inside that division. Or actually, they're not having any divisions this year because UConn left. It's just one bulk conference since UConn's an independent. But maybe South Florida gets a little bit, with a new coaching staff of an edge if they can get their kids back quicker onto campus. It's going to be, we talked about young coaches the other day or last week, and are they an asset? Are they a detriment? Exactly what are they? Charlie Weiss, 27, offensive coordinator who's been around the block already at 27 years old, born in 1993. I can look in my own house and find a kid born in 1993. So that's how young Charlie Weiss Jr. is. The good news with this hire is that both of these guys basically run the same offense. And I went through this yesterday. Charlie Weiss at Florida Atlantic last year for Lane Kiffin, and Jeff Scott, of course, under Dabo Swinney at Clemson, both prefer this up-tempo spread with RPO action. Kind of a power running game. Again, I'll refer back to Florida Atlantic with Lane Kiffin, who liked to run power a little bit as his style of running game. There have been a lot of systems offensively that we've gone through, guys, that I've mentioned. A dual threat quarterback is not a necessity, but the offense works better with one. Here, I'm going to change that up a little bit because you go back through the quarterbacks that these guys have had, that they've tutored the last 6 years. And I think a better way to describe the quarterback that fits this offense is a pro-style quarterback with running ability. And I'll go back to Clemson, where Jeff Scott's first quarterback was Cole Stout. For those like me and Ralph, remember his dad, Cliff Stout, was a backup with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The kid resembled the father, pretty much a sitting duck inside the pocket. But after that, it became Deshaun Watson, and it became Trevor Lawrence. That's who Jeff Scott is at to work with. That's a pretty good duo right there. Charlie Weiss Jr. in college worked with a guy we talked about an awful lot for Florida Atlantic, Chris Robeson, another pro-style quarterback with running ability. When we did that team's analysis, Ralph pointed out the fact that last year, 84 carries for minus 60 yards out of Robeson, but the year before, 72 carries for 213 yards. And one of them was a 45-yard run. So if you have a lead, but you're a pro-style quarterback, that fits. And maybe Jordan McLeod fits the bill here. he wasn't terrible last year. The offensive line is what was terrible. And again, while I spiel on here, Ralph, I'll give this to you for when I finish here. But offensive line numbers, I believe I saw they have 36 starts returning on the offensive line this year, which isn't a bunch. But if they stink again, maybe the quarterback can't get on track. Weiss Jr. is a pretty balanced play caller. If you go over what he did for Florida last year, the Owls averaged 77.5 plays per game. The percentages were 52-3 run, 47-7 pass, so pretty equal. It's like what Clemson likes to do. I think both of these guys are on the same page, and Ralph talked about a lot of JC transfers that could help offensively in this type of system. It's got to be better than what Kerwin Bell ran last year. And believe me, the fans of USF ran him out of town. He branded his system as play fast, score faster. Hashtag play fast, score faster. And you know what they did? They went out and they were the 115th ranked scoring offense in the nation, only averaged 20.8 points per game. So Kerwin Bell out the door, in with Charlie Weiss Jr. might work. Obviously, I think, again, talent and time make a difference here. On the defensive side, we get to see Glenn Spencer in yet again another setting. I think this is his third stop in the last 3 years. 2018, he had Charlotte. 2019, last year, he had FAU. FAU was a good defensive team last year, and his career, guys, is interesting. Glenn Spencer, a guy who's a veteran. I mean, the 10 years prior to Charlotte, he was at Oklahoma State. And you go through his yearly defenses, and it's all over the place. Real good, real bad. Real good, real bad. And I think, you know, in his case at Oklahoma State, I think he got caught in a transfer. He's there from 08 to 17. He arrived at a time when there were a lot of offenses in that league that still weren't spread offenses. The offense is there. Texas, Oklahoma, Iowa State, TCU, A&M were still more run dominant, and Spencer's defense seemed to work a little bit better. Then when the turn came and everybody went to spread offenses, it was tough for him to catch up. OSU's recent offenses weren't great. They're predicated on getting the team, the opponent, behind the sticks. He wants to get you in long distance, down and distance situations. They'll blitz a lot on first down, but it's kind of an all or nothing defense, guys. If you have a team that is got a play call for the blitz or has an offensive line and protection that can withstand the blitz, this team's going to get beat a lot. So it's an interesting defense. We'll see how it goes. I kind of equate him to this. If he's got a talented defense, they're going to do well. If he's got mediocre talent, they're going to go down the drain. It's the ultimate players win games type of theory here with this coach. He prioritizes mental and physical toughness, what defensive coach doesn't. The problem for him is this team had no spring practices, got no time on the field. That's why I think, Drew, when I asked you in the beginning about Central Florida, maybe getting these kids back to campus would be real important from that standpoint. South Florida wasn't a good defense. They weren't a good offense, and they're making changes on both sides. We'll see. 4.5 isn't a big number to hurdle in the AAC, but we'll see if they can do it.
You know, adding to that, Rob, like you said, you know, their defense wasn't bad for their offensive numbers. You know, as many 3-and-outs as they had and as many sacks as they had. They have two transfers. You know, linebacker Gill had 14 starts at Michigan. A DT out of Wofford who had 14 starts, who was second team SoCon. SoCon plays some decent ball. So, you know, there's some FCS transfers that won't make noise, but I think he brought in 2 starters from the transfer blocks. And, you know, as important as the OC and DC, I'm going to add one more coach in there. Last year, you talked about some of those sack numbers, Robbie. Their O-line allowed 45 sacks. That was number 126 in the FBS. There's only 130 teams. So you were basically the worst O-line. And they brought in Alan Mogridge, a young kid out of FIU who's had a top 10 O-line in sacks the last couple years. There's a few O-line guys. I mean, Ed Orgeron started it, and there's a few O-line guys that can make a difference. from what I understand about this kid, he really is a young O-line guru, and I think he's going to be something that they're going to need. I think someone that's really going to benefit that team.
Yeah, and to that point, Ralph, real quick, those 45 sacks, Jordan McLeod last year, I did these numbers. He had 105 rushing attempts, and in college, a sack is counted as a rushing attempt. So the guy really only ran the ball 60 times. If you break down the yardage, he gained 471 yards on his 60 runs, basically, and lost 188 yards, 5 sacks.
Good point.
So the numbers for the quarterback style that these two guys like, Weiss and Scott, I think he might fit the bill. He's got a year up on, they brought in Cade Fortin from UNC, right? UNC, he played in 18, sat out last year. And one more guy I want to mention as far as offensive production is concerned is Johnny Ford, who might be one of the most explosive players in the NCAA. Last year only got 6 games. Kick returner, wide receiver, everything for this team. So Johnny Ford will be a huge asset to this offense as well.
Last point. To make your Jordan McLeod point, people look at Jordan McLeod and say, he only completed 55%. He only had a 6.4 yards per attempt, and he only had a 12-8 ratio. But my thought is this. If you remember the Jets games after their quarterback got hurt in week 1, how the quarterback had to sit back there and have no time, that's the quarterback that put up those numbers. That's the comparison that you have to think in your head. I agree that Jordan McLeod, who started 7 games last year, wins the job.
Yeah, and I also think it's a better system for him, Ralph, because, like Robbie's saying, his profile of quarterback, it's more of a read, second read, and then go. Use your feet to help you. Not, their past offenses were a little bit more pressure on the quarterback. At least that's how I read it. But Ralph, I really want to get your opinion here, because as you and Robbie are talking about USF, USF, the Bulls, a lot of talent, a new head coach, an offensive coordinator that's proved that he can kind of turn things around and do pretty well, even though he's a young guy. The problem is here, and I think you guys touched on it, man, their schedule is tough. It gets tough to find 4.5 wins here, guys. I mean, they're at Texas. They do get Bethune-Cookman, and then it's Nevada, which Ralph just pointed on is circled as a bet-on team. Then they have to head to Boca Raton and play FAU. That's a talented team themselves. And then they get the top notch of AAC outside of East Carolina, maybe Tulsa. I mean, now we're starting to throw out Navy as a possible win. Ralph, it's just USF I have as improving, but to get to over 4.5 in the AAC, especially with this schedule, man, I just don't see it. How do you feel about their season win total?
Well, I have them. You're going to beat Bethune-Cookman. They'll be a 31-point favorite as far as my power ratings go. I have them as a 6.6 favorite against East Carolina, a 1.9 favorite against Tulsa. So I have them as a favorite in only those 3 games, and Nevada. So there are 4 games where they're a favorite. Everything else, they're a dog of 4.5 or more. So, it's not a win total that I would look at, although they're a team that I wouldn't bet against because I think they have the upside. And I was so anti-Charlie Strong that I think it has to help them. So, you have some winnable games in the middle there. I have them as a 4.5-point dog against Navy. But again, if you see the season progress, I can see them being a favorite against Navy late in the year. They could be a 6 or 7-point favorite against Tulsa. So there's teams that I'm happy to bet on the over. There's teams I'm happy to bet on the under. But as important for our viewers, if you really have a question, just don't bet the over-under. It's okay not to bet things. And this is one of those where my numbers lean under, the schedule stays under, but I think there's potential to go over. So I'll leave it, watch it, and see as the season progresses.
And Robbie, I guess just to follow up here, with that Navy game, there isn't a bye before that. They're actually on the road the week before. That's not usually promising for playing an option team. Like Ralph is saying, though, you don't have to bet all these. There's a lot of upside here, though, with USF. I mean, the type of upside where, heck, that week 1 game against September 5th at Texas, they could be, kind of a live underdog, maybe to kind of give Texas a run here just because of the talent discrepancy, the new head coach with the quarterback profile that I think fits well. But, the 4.5 season win totals, and I'm saying all that and still not going to bet the over on 4.5 season win totals. So I'm kind of contradicting myself. But any last opinions here on the season win total?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick add on recruiting. Again, this is the second team in a row that's had a poor recruiting ranking. But Ralph pointed out all the JCs that they brought in, and it's a younger coaching staff now. Jeff Scott, Charlie Weiss Jr. I think that it's a more aggressive recruiting style here. So like San Diego State, I could see the recruiting numbers go up. And if they go up, the AAC, one of those group of 6 conferences that, they can be flipped upside down at any time. And a team that is located in Central Florida, if they can get the talent in there, they can make a quick move. It'll be a little bit of a transition, but I do think recruiting wise, they're going to get more talent in that place.
Hey, Drew, I'll give you 23.5 at Texas week 1.
Want to take it, Drew?
Is that the line, like the consensus line right now?
That's I don't think there's a line on that game for week 1. If there is, I don't know it. I'm giving you a number from my ratings where I'm happy to give you. So if you want to put your money where your mouth is, or you could say pass, we'll talk later.
Will you give me 7 days and on next week's show, I'll give you an answer?
Absolutely. Fair enough.
All right. I'm going to do a little bit more research, especially on the other side, the Texas side. But, yeah, good stuff. And speaking about Texas, we got the UTSA Roadrunners here up last. And, guys, any questions here, throw them out in the chat box. We do have one. We'll throw it out into the Big Ten. I know Ralph's a Big Ten guy, so we'll get it out to him. Also, keep in mind, guys, each and every Tuesday, 1 o'clock Eastern time, we're breaking this down, the college football preview show. Robbie Veno, Ralph Michaels, myself, Drew Martin. Follow Robbie on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Ralph on Twitter at Cal Sports LV. He's a great follow on Twitter. Both of them are throwing out all kinds of stats, college football. Hey, Robbie, you handicapping the KBO, Korean baseball?
I've actually bet it. I didn't bet opening day, but the last 4 or 5 days I have, and I'm learning as I go along, Drew. You become a little bit of a Dinos fan here because they seem to cash tickets. But yeah, especially Matt Williams coaching over there now. And you do see some American names. I think I watched a game today with Omar Despaigne throwing, ex-San Diego Padres pitchers. So you do see a few of those out there. But yeah, I mean, it sparked my interest. And it's, we're on the Eastern time zone here, Drew. These 5:30 a.m., 3:35 a.m., these start times aren't conducive to getting any sleep, that's for sure.
No, I actually record them and watch them when I wake up. But Ralph, what about you, man? How's your betting life treating you?
Pretty much non-existent. I will say I'm going to give a plug out to 2 guys at Wager Talk for the UFC. I jumped on VR and Kyle's stuff. VR, just an absolute guru. Since there's a Wednesday event, let's mention it. VR went 7-3. Kyle Anthony went 3-0. Kyle Anthony is now 17-1 his last 18 UFC fights. So I know there's fights Wednesday, and I have jumped on both of those guys and played their UFC.
Yeah, and Kyle and Minty Bets actually do a show here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. So they'll be breaking down UFC this week. Check it out right here on the Wager Talk YouTube channel and wagertalk.com for those plays. Like Ralph said, both guys really hot. So check that out, guys. UTSA Roadrunners to finish it up here, guys. 4-8 last year, 7-5, 4-8 straight up, 7-5 ATS is what I got them at. 6-6 over under. So not a lot of kind of off the mark there in terms of how the odds makers were pricing them. The last 3 games, I will say this, in terms of things a lot of people might not find that I have circled on as a bet on here, and Robbie, interested to get your opinion on this. The last 3 games of the UTSA Roadrunners season, they played Southern Miss. They lost 36-17. They played FAU. They lost 40-26. And then they played Louisiana Tech. They lost 41-27. Keep in mind, Louisiana, those are 3 good teams. Louisiana Tech and FAU are the two best teams in Conference USA by my numbers. They did go 0-3, but they covered those last two games with ease. I have that circled, UTSA here, just a 4-8 team, as watch out. Maybe look to bet them. They didn't quit on their season. But Robbie, what are you thinking here for the Roadrunners in 2020?
Well, I think we're in another conference, like we just talked about with the AAC, these groups, one being the CUSA, that can be flipped upside down. I mean, you can go bottom to top in a hurry. And much like South Florida in their conference, UTSA is in a talent-rich state. So, again, you look at the coaching staff that they brought in, a couple of Arkansas guys. Jeff Traylor gets the head coaching job. Barry Lunny Jr. is who he brings with him to run his offense. And they get longtime defensive veteran Tyrone Nix to run the defense. But again, I think, while the previous staff, the head coach was a Texas high school guy and probably had left really good ties to Texas, San Antonio from that state. We'll see if these guys can capitalize and get even more talent here. But I do think when you're in that big of a state, like we said earlier, you can get the third, fourth, fifth, seventh guy, that all the Power 5 guy teams leave behind. And it's still top-notch for your conference. So we'll see. Recruiting may be okay here. As far as offense is concerned, Barry Lunny, first words out of his mouth, our offense will play fast. Okay, you're like everybody else in 2020. Now we're all going to play fast, which is fine. The system, though, they're going to have a blend here. There's a few teams, and all the research that I've done, since March on college football coaching staff changes, there's a few here that really are trying to create unique offenses that make it difficult with only 1 week to prepare for. Here, they've blended a lot of staff offensive views, and they're trying to use the players' talents to its utmost. Basically, what this offense is, it's a pro-style offense, pro-style passing game. That's where the conceptual stuff comes from, and it's going to be played at fast tempo. If you want a visual, here's how the coaching staff sees it. When it's all said and done, might not be this year, could be 2-3 years down the road. They want this to resemble the New England Patriots no huddle offense. 11 personnel, one back, one tight end, and up tempo. So if you remember when Tom Brady takes the Patriots up tempo, that's what they want this to look like. Pro style offense in no huddle, up tempo form. But they won't, as they do in the NFL, everything comes from under center. This is going to be a shotgun-based offense. That'll probably be the only difference when they get it to their liking. That's what they're working on. Again, the main attribute to this, while it's going to take a lot of teaching, a lot of learning, and sometimes when you have younger football teams, it's a little bit easier because they're not too deep into the learning of the previous system. And you can shake those thoughts and get your new point across. And again, all of these teams have had nothing but time to, at least the personnel has had nothing but time to put their heads in the playbook and try to learn mentally what's supposed to go on the field. The on-field stuff is tough here. This is another team that was unable to hold any practices. So, that's a tough thing to go through when you're having two system changes, but they're not unique in that situation. So figure the offense to be a project, but one that could work out. And if in fact they get it rolling in year one, could be tough in Conference USA for sure. I'd rather look at game by game point spread stuff than season win totals for this team, unless the number, and I'm sure you'll give it to us, Drew, unless the number is something just outrageously low. But Tyrone Nix is a guy we need to talk about here. He's been at DC. I think this is his 5th time as a defensive coordinator. And he's been in a lot of SEC places, guys, as well as Southern Miss, where I think probably he had his best years at Southern Miss. But he was part of a defensive turnaround at Mississippi last year. They came in there. He wasn't the defensive coordinator, but he was part of the staff. They took Mississippi's 4-2-5, obviously designed to stop spread offenses, and they switched to a 3-4 under Mike McIntyre. And when we did the Ole Miss analysis, if people watching want to go back and just rerun the Mississippi tape, we talked about how the job that Mike McIntyre did defensively at Mississippi last year, the increase The productive increase to the positive was tremendous for the Rebels last year. 4.25 to a 3.4. Well, he's in the same spot this year. UTSA was a 4.25 team. They're converting to a 3.4. I could almost see the same results happening, Drew. This is not the SEC. It's on a lesser scale. And these 3-4 defenses are the wave of college football right now, odd man fronts. I mentioned in an earlier show about these 3-4 tights is what they call them, just designed to stop passing games in the spread. If he can get it done here, obviously you have to make positional changes. When you go from 4 down linemen to 3, that means, defensive ends become linebackers, safeties become linebackers. There's all kinds of personnel switches on the perimeter that go on. And when you have no practice time to assess your talent on the field, it's a set question. It's a setback. So I like the move, but I just don't know that, Tyrone Nix is going to have enough time to assess his players to make it work immediately. He himself said that his linebacker depth is an immediate issue on this team. So they have to have a couple of recruiting classes in here before they get to where they want to be as far as that's concerned. Defensive backs are important here too. He mentioned a lot of quarters coverage, a lot of cover one, so a lot of zone behind their front seven. I kind of like what they've done here, but it's got to be another wait and see type deal. Like I said earlier, point spread wise, I'll be very interested to see where UTSA is priced, what their totals are. But as far as wins, season wins and losses go, or season win totals go, I'm not so sure. And real quick, before I stop here, I just want to point out we were talking about guys making us money from Wager Talk on other sports. Let's point out how quickly Ski Profit has developed into a Gulfstream Park expert here. I jokingly broke his balls one day because he didn't have any winners in the first 4 races, but the next day he came back with a ton of winners. So Marco has the horse racing show. Maybe we could see Ski as a Gulfstream expert on there. Nice job out there, Ski.
Yeah, that'd be awesome to get him even more so on the horses. Yeah, Ski, a good profit or a good follow on Twitter at Ski Profit. The season win total for UTSA is slotted at 3 at Caesars right now, Ralph. And I don't know, man. Looking at this schedule, they got at LSU to start, but they have some winnable games here. I mean, Grambling State, Texas State, Old Dominion, Rice. There are some winnable games, but this is a tough handicap, man. And then Robbie's saying, linebacker depth issues. That doesn't really make me want to bet the over for season win totals. But what are you thinking here for UTSA?
Well, I'm not a big fan of the coaching change, and they may prove me wrong, but both guys were high school guys that came and spent a lot of time at Arkansas, but neither the head coach or the OC had been an OC before. And yeah, Nix has a name, and yes, the Ole Miss defense was good, but he was an outside linebacker coach last year. He wasn't part of the coordinating staff. He was at Virginia Tech the year before when they got absolutely shelled, and then he was a Texas A&M defensive assistant the year before that. So he's bounced around 3 different programs the last 3 years. But hey, I have them a favorite in 3 games. They're going to be a favorite against Grambling, a favorite against Old Dominion, a favorite against UTEP. So, if you say the total's 3.5 and you have 3 winnable games and then 2 other games where you're a small favorite or a pick'em game, I break down my win total says 3.98. So I would lean with the over. You have a quarterback who's returning in Lowell Narcissus. He started 7 games. You have an offensive running back who was, an All-American, freshman All-American runner-up in McCormick, who's going to lead the way. 3 offensive linemen starters back. On defense, you have 6 starters back. Well, you have 5, but you have 6 guys that started at least 6 games. But again, can they turn into a winning program? We talked about recruiting at the last 2 schools, a surprising number. Well, I thought maybe we did these shows, Drew, by recruiting rank. USF was 101, San Diego State was 104, UTSA is 105. So while you say 105 is not good, but if you say, hey, UTSA had the same recruiting class as USF or San Diego State, all of a sudden that doesn't look so bad. So, an anomaly with them. again, their offense wasn't that good, but you talked about covering. They returned 99% of their passing yards, 97% of their rushing yards, 98.5% of their whole offense. They set a school record for tackles for loss, so they do have a pass rush. They averaged 8 TFLs per game, 2.5 sacks per game, and a couple guys that were solid were Haynes and Hicks. So it's a team that it's funny that USF I liked and I wouldn't bet the over-under. Here I don't really like the coaches, but the way the schedule plays out, I would lean with the over. And, the schedule's not that strong to pull out 3.5 wins. I would not bet them at LSU. I have that line at 49.5. If I'm the head coach, listen, I'm this. We have a winnable game at Texas State next week. We're playing back-to-back road games. I let my guys go out there. I let them learn the offense in live. I pull them in the second half, and I get ready to win against Texas State. And then we host Grambling, who I have them as a 10-point favorite, and I get to 2-1 in the season. So an LSU game, I am happy to fade them in the opener or perhaps look to live bet that if they score, or if it's close in the first half, I expect them to get blown out in the second half to stay healthy for those winnable games. Because, Memphis, you're going to lose. UAB, you're going to lose. Old Dominion, you're going to be a favorite. So you can be 3-3 through the first 6 games of the season. You also have a bye before Old Dominion. That game, you're going to be a 3.5-point favorite. So while I'm not excited about the coaching change, I would actually lean with the over 3.5.
Ralph, if you're still looking to take bets, would you give me 49.5 if I took UTSA?
Well, no, because we talked about this last week, and I didn't adjust my numbers. I talked about having that new coaching sheet, and I didn't get it done because I did an NFL schedule guide up at Wager Talk. So make sure you check that out. It's free. But LSU's numbers are going to come down about 7 or 8 points. I believe I'll drop it that much, but I'll be happy I'll give you 42 and a hook.
I thought you said 49. I was liking
the numbers in my computer now taking LSU down. I talked about this last show that I have to, losing 15 players to the draft. Right. I just didn't lower them enough. That's a historic number to lose, and there's going to be a historic fallback. But, I'll give you the next week, too, if you want 42 and a hook.
I'll think about it, man. But I'm with you on that LSU falling back. And I mean, UTSA just randomly being the first team up. I would circle UTSA in the points here. But, guys, we are running up against it time-wise. Did have one question in terms of, Robbie, you brought up in terms states that open up and let football teams come back and practice, possibly being a bet on. I mean, would you just kind of, look to factor that in? And do you think that can actually happen where some teams are going to be able to start practicing for a week one on the same date? If it's the same date where one team is getting, 5-10 extra practices before that week one, is the NCAA going to let that happen?
Well, it's interesting, Drew, and who knows, because there's nobody really in charge where that's concerned. What triggered that thought for me was a Dan Mullen interview. Dan Mullen said that in 2 weeks, Florida is going to open up gyms for people to go to. And Dan Mullen said rather than have our kids go and frequent gyms, Snap Fitness, whatever the gym may be, we'd rather bring them back to campus, put them in our facility where we can control the environment. We don't want them out where there's a bunch of other people. So he's thinking in 2 weeks, they might bring their kids back. Now, who's going to stop that from happening? I'm not sure if the NCAA governing body is going to stop that or if the Power 5 powers that be are just going to go ahead and make their own rules. We'll see what happens here. Nobody's got the answers to that right now. But when I heard Mullins say that, and he's an SEC head coach for the Florida Gators, I try and read into what these people are saying. And for me, perhaps that's a thought just to keep in mind where Florida and Texas are concerned, especially you have the other states like California, New York, and places that are not going to be open as quickly. So it could present a competitive advantage. Real quick here, 2 things, guys. I said South Florida had 0 spring practices. They had 2. Still not enough to assess everything, but they did squeeze in 2. And secondly, Ralph, on the Texas San Antonio coaching staff, while the incoming guys might not be guys that you want to immediately give a thumbs up to. The three in the positions of head coach, offensive coordinator, and defensive coordinator that left, Frank Wilson, Jeff Castle, and Jason Rollins, were not exactly highly sought after. Rollins is now with the Southern U coaching staff. Castle is now with the Indiana State coaching staff. Frank Wilson is now with the McNeese State coaching staff, 3 FCS guys. If the incoming staff may not fit our fancy, but they might be as good or maybe better than what left there, because what left there wasn't exactly a desired group of coaches that FBS schools were after for even a positional coaching spot.
Yeah, they tried to have that Texas high school coach keep the Texas talent in, like Sanchez did at UNLV here, right. And neither worked. So, and again, he was a high school coach back 2005 to 2012 in Arkansas, and then he's been at Arkansas. So I just thought they would find a Texas guy somewhere on that head coach OCDC run, which they didn't do. So that's what surprises me. Now, there's a lot of teams that have a lot of great recruiters that aren't the head coach OCDC. So they may have some that I'm unfamiliar with that can try to keep some of that Longhorn talent in state.
Yeah, usually that's the case too. The positional coaches are the better recruiters.
Yeah.
Great stuff, guys. And everybody in the chat, thanks for joining us. Abel, Paco, Roger, also Chris Wager Talk, thanks, buddy. And please smash the like button on your way out, guys. It does help us. But for Rob Veno, at Rob Veno Sports on Twitter, and Ralph Michaels, at Cal Sports LV on Twitter, I am Drew Martin.
Hey,
guys,
Drew,
thanks for joining us.
One last thing. Prez, Mid-Major Matt, and I are starting an NFL show at 3 p.m. Eastern right here at Wager Talk TV starting today. It'll be every Tuesday. We break down an NFL conference. That's Prez, me, and Mid-Major Matt.
Every Tuesday, 3 o'clock Eastern?
Yep. Today we're doing the NFC East.
So we got college football and NFL on Tuesdays. So back-to-back 1 and 3 o'clock Eastern time. So good stuff on the Wager Talk YouTube, guys. Remember to wash your hands. Best of luck with your bets. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next Tuesday.